All right. Well, welcome, Jen. Thanks so much for coming on. I wanted to talk with you specifically because of a topic I think is real serious. It is real serious. I know that, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think. Um, and you experienced this kind of loss 4 times, you said, at
Mhm.
least 4 times that you know about. And that's the loss, what we call miscarriage or loss of a child in the womb, um, and experiencing that 4 times. So I'm like, I think Jen could talk about this. It's not
Mhm.
something you wanted to become an expert in, right? But
No, never planned on that.
you weren't planned
Mm,
on that at
no.
all. So when was what was the situation for the first time this happened? Had you already had a child, or was it before your kids'
It was my first pregnancy.
first pregnancy? Okay.
Yeah. I remember praying for a baby.
Hmm.
In my bed, I was just, I don't know, like I felt ready, but you never know if it's the right time, but
Hmm.
it was just what I had felt.
Hmm.
Um, and I was married about a year. I had just started a job, or was about to start a job as a paraprofessional in a school,
Hmm.
um, as a one-on-one aide. And I did not expect to get pregnant at the very beginning of the year. I felt like I was really naive because um, I I knew about pregnancy. I didn't know much, honestly. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was like, I was late for my period and I took a test and I grabbed the one that said pregnant, not pregnant, and it said pregnant, and you just get so excited.
Mm.
You're naive, honestly. You're just like, this is amazing. I can't believe it happened.
Was Tim as excited, or was he like, "How are we going to pay for this?"
Um, probably all of that.
Yeah, well, that's most dads, especially, because it is
Um,
harder for, I think, for a father to get as excited in the beginning, depending on the situation. But in that kind of situation, so like, whoa, because it's like
mhm.
we don't immediately bond with a child like a mom does. But you felt those real feelings of excitement.
Yeah, and I was 24
Hmm.
or 23,
Hmm.
and he was a couple years younger. So we're like so young.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I had found out, and you don't know who to tell. So I told the school nurse. I was like, she'll understand.
Yeah, yeah.
um, and then literally, like, I had started telling just a few people, messaging them and asking just like all these questions, like, is this normal to feel? Is this normal?
Hmm.
And then literally like a week after that, I started having brown spotting. And I was like, is this normal? And I'd get messages back like, well, I never had that. Um, and then eventually it turned to,
Had you had a chance to go see a doctor yet, or was it so
no,
soon?
it, yeah, it was so soon. I
Yeah.
was, 5, 6 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and I was like, I don't think this is normal. So, um, geez, it's been so long. It's hard to remember all the
Oh,
details.
of course.
But
Because for people who don't know you, you have 5 children that
yeah.
are with us.
Yeah.
So you've been through this
Yeah.
whole thing
And this
since a lot.
was 15 years ago now.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do remember that loss. I think I went to the ER. Um, and it was just a natural miscarriage where it just everything just leaves your body
Yep.
normally. It's just like having a horrible, horrible period.
Yep.
Except it's not.
Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know that the baby is leaving your body. Um, so I was just so I had felt so bad about that because, like I said, I was so naive. Um, that I had we Tim and I had announced it to our church, back where we were living, and that's just what you did when you got pregnant, you announced it at the church.
Mm,
I had no thought ever that I would possibly lose the baby.
mm.
Um,
Had you known anyone like personally in your life? I mean, you knew of
mm,
people, but anyone close to you, friends or family that had lost a
not
baby?
one.
Yeah. So it makes sense that you're not
Yeah.
even thinking that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so lonely. You just go online and you look for any comfort at all. Um, and that's obviously the wrong thing to do. Or you just want information because when you have zero clue about anything, you want answers and you want them immediately when you're going through something and you have zero people to talk to. And
What
you're
was it like? So you had to do you announced that. I would assume if you announced it to the church, you probably also told family and
Yeah, yeah. I think we told my dad and Tim's parents, and his sister,
mm,
um, and of course we had to make the other announcement, that we
yeah.
had lost the baby.
What was that like? How did you make that
Um,
announcement?
I'm not even sure I was there.
Yeah, you let Tim do it or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I like can barely remember. I just remember the feelings.
And how did people respond? I know it's 15 years ago, but
Um, so I didn't exactly like the response. I mean, nobody came up to me and was like immediately and was like, I also had a miscarriage or this and this and this. And that wasn't until like a little bit later, but it was more, you know, and I hate to say it, but it was more like, God knows, and it's like I know He knows, but I'm going through this right now. I want someone right here in front of me to be comforting me, and your perspective is just not God's perspective that He knows everything and He's in control and it was never yours to begin with. It's this is my body and I feel like I'm broken.
mm.
Yeah, it's just a very
Do you
lonely
think
place.
and this might play into the few of your future stories that we'll talk about, but do you feel like because it was so that and again it's hard to think for other people, but do you think somewhere behind that some of them were just like, I mean, you couldn't have become too attached kind of thing? I mean, no one would obviously say that, but
I don't know. I don't think anyone has said that to me. It's more like they don't know how to act around you. They
mm,
don't it just definitely wasn't talked about even more then. I mean, 15 years ago, that's like going on almost 20 years, and things are different these days. I
yeah.
think people are willing to talk about things more,
Mm,
but maybe an older woman had gone through miscarriage, but I'm like, yeah, you've got 2 or 3 grown kids now. I've
yeah,
got nothing.
right. Right. So you felt like you said alone, like you just
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because not only were we young, all of our friends are young.
Yeah.
They have never been through this. They didn't have
Right.
kids yet.
Right.
They couldn't comfort us in the way that we needed it.
Mm,
Um, it's just all about perspective now because God was like, not that one.
mm,
Why? I don't know. I'll never
mm.
know. Um, one of them I knew because of some testing that was done, but it's almost like it doesn't matter.
Mm. What was it like? What was your emotions like when you were going through that bad period? When you actually knew you were losing the baby, what was that like?
I'm starting to remember a little bit more now. I had gotten some testing done, just for like levels of, um, it's called HCG. It's like measures how much pregnancy hormones are in your body. And I just remember them telling me that it was just just so low. Um, and then one day they tested again and were like, you're definitely not pregnant. Um,
Mm,
but the period part is just, I would say that it was painful it like literally going through the miscarriage, there's it's like giving labor,
Yeah.
except
Yeah.
it's not
Nothing good at the end, at least that you can
yeah,
see.
but like when you have a normal period, yes, you get cramps, but it was just more intense. Um
Yeah.
and of course shorter.
Yeah. I was just thinking more of the emotional pain. Like, were there certain things you were thinking? Obviously, you said you were feeling alone. Anything else that
That's
you can remember?
honestly the biggest thing. It's like you're just so alone and um you feel broken because it's your body. No one else. It's not even your husband can't even excuse me, possibly understand because it's not in him.
Yeah. Oh,
um
yeah. That's impossible for a father to understand, to
mhm.
truly understand. You can try as best you can. It's just not there. It's different. You didn't have any opportunity to bond at all. And even though it was only a few weeks, 6 weeks or whatever you said it was, it's a baby inside of you.
Mhm.
And it's, you bond immediately, you know?
Yeah, and also you're with it 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's like you're it's actually like every single day it just builds up and I don't want to say you're romanticizing, but you're imagining like what it's going to be like one day and then all of that's stripped away from you.
When you said the word broken, that's an interesting choice of words. Like, you felt like your body failed somehow, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons why someone can lose a baby. And not only broken, but what did I do? Did I eat something? Did I do something?
Yeah.
Did I not take care of myself properly before? Did I not take the right vitamins? Like, what happened to
Yeah.
make this happen?
So a little bit of feeling of, I don't know if guilt's the right word, but like you
Yeah,
blame
definitely.
yourself a little bit.
Yeah, because you want answers. But
Yeah.
when you can't get answers, you search for answers or you make things up to comfort yourself.
Hmm.
But it's not comforting. It's just like a horrible spiral.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were young, still young, but to me, but you were really young, and it was a while ago. But do you remember, like, what were? Because I mean, if you're hearing from people, they're saying the right things. God is sovereign. God's got a plan. Blah blah blah. And you obviously did not believe that. But what was your relationship with God like during that? Did it, like, how do you remember your prayer life like? What was it?
It's probably the worst thing, I feel like. One of the worst things that can happen to a woman
Mm.
that will ultimately challenge your faith.
Mm.
Um, there's things that happen around you, and then there's things that happen to you. And then when it happens inside your body, I don't know, it just feels like it's on a different level.
Mm. I'm sure it is.
But I, I just felt so separate from him because I
Mm.
just couldn't rationalize it. Um, I feel, excuse me, I feel still like I'm in recovery a
Mm.
little bit from all of that give and take.
Mm.
And I'm like, I just didn't understand why. Do I think maybe he was, I do think now that maybe he was saving me from a life of hardship, from
Mm.
dealing with a child that maybe had a genetic disorder,
Mm.
or from losing a child later on, possibly early in life. I don't know. Um,
That's the thing, though, right? Like, you just don't know. Like,
yeah.
God's like, you gonna trust me or not? And man, that's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially as a 24-year-old woman who never even thought about something like that. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like you hadn't experienced struggles, because you had in your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
but this is, like you said, different. This is your body, and it's a whole different level of, like, ugh.
Yeah, and it's not, you think it's not common, but it actually is.
Oh,
It's
very.
extremely common.
Yeah.
You just don't find that out until later.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's, well, split the population in half. Males,
Yep.
it's almost impossible for them to understand.
Right.
And women, it doesn't happen to every woman. So it does kind of whittle down to those who have been through it. And if those people aren't in your life, it's going to be harder to find. So that's what brought me to like forums or stuff online to talk to people that have been through something similar, or support for when you do get pregnant and, just everything you go through. So it's,
That's pre-social media for the most part. We're talking.
yeah,
So you're
yeah.
talking like going on like message board type stuff that
Mm-hmm.
kind of predated,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Facebook and all that stuff. I mean, you had
Mm-hmm.
MySpace probably, but you didn't have a band. So,
No.
so, um, but a similar kind of thing, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit less intrusive, which is probably good. Um, you had to go
Mm-hmm.
looking for it rather than, you know, yeah. I, I wonder, and maybe you have insight on this. I haven't gone through it so much, but is there, is it just simply the reason people kind of like are a little bit standoffish? Is it just because A, they don't understand, B, especially with women who haven't gone through it, it's like they don't really want to get too close to it because it's not something they want to experience, which would equate it to almost any bad struggle that someone is going through in life that we haven't, right? That either I don't understand it or I don't ever want to experience that. But is there something else when it comes to miscarriage that people, especially in general, don't want to think about or to to deal with or try to even let me empathize with you? Because the way to do that is like tell me what you're going through. And it feels like to me in the different experiences I've seen others go through it is like people just sort of want to move on and they want you to move on. Was that your experience?
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
couldn't move on.
No.
No,
No.
not at all. Literally, I hate to say it, but it feels like the only way to move on is to have a baby.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
that isn't the case with everyone.
Sometimes you can't.
Yeah. Or sometimes you adopt, or sometimes you
Right.
do things that you probably shouldn't do to have a baby
Yeah.
in God's eyes. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure because I'm not other people. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
keeps them away. Yeah.
But it feels to me like it's a little different than if you had lost a baby that everyone had met.
Yeah,
Which at that
because you
point,
can't see it.
right, an experience. And at that point, dad immediately bonds,
Mhm.
almost immediately when you can hold your baby and interact and eat and change or do whatever.
Mhm.
It's like that. And now you're very similar. But before that, it's really, really hard. Especially that soon. What
Mhm.
you had that, but I'm sure it was harder for Tim, harder for people to even envision you, what
Mhm.
that baby's going to look like. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden the baby's gone.
Yeah, it's almost imaginary, I guess, to people, and you
Mm.
don't know if it's a boy, you don't know if it's a girl.
Yeah.
There's not much for them to feel. They just know you, but you know what you're going through, and you know the baby, like
Yeah.
as much as I mean, you know what the baby's doing to your body, all of those things, like the different feelings you're feeling because your body's going through so many changes. Um,
What would you tell someone who, in the next year or so knows somebody kind of close, whether they're a friend or even if they're the husband, or even if they're a friend and or a family member that has a miscarriage, what would you suggest they do? And it's obviously every person's different. Not everyone is you, but what generally would you advise them to do?
they could go to perhaps a support group so
No,
that,
the person who knows somebody.
oh,
That's
I
what I
see,
mean.
got it.
Yeah, because we're talking about how like
Oh,
like people
how to
seem to
help
know.
people
Yeah, what
to
do you
deal.
do?
Yeah. Um, you just, of course, tell them that you're praying for them, but be there to
Okay,
listen.
listen
Yeah, that is
and not offer
the number one thing
maybe
is
don't offer a
listening.
lot of feedback. Just
Yeah,
unless you've been through it, maybe like someone like
yeah.
you, I would expect you listen a lot, but could give some feedback that would be Trust it because you've
Mhm.
been through it.
It's
You know.
hard too because it's like, doctors don't go through everything that their patients go through, but they can still give them wise information.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
Bible verses to comfort, um, shoulder to cry on.
Mm.
Um, I just say mainly be available. Though I'm not sure that person is going to reach out when they need time alone. They need
Yeah.
time to process.
Yep.
Um, but I think just telling them that you're um, willing to be there is super helpful
Mm.
because then you're not as alone.
Yeah. Because you said the biggest feelings, the two biggest words that I got out of your story is broken and alone. Broken is probably something only God can do over
Mm-hmm.
time, but alone people can help with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it really is a common thread. As I've had conversations with all different types of struggle, not just loss, um, uh, grieving loss. It, it's like I just don't want to think I'm dealing with this by myself, and just be there.
It's like when you're going through literally anything, like say you get in a car accident,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm the only one in the world going through this right now.
Right.
When no, everyone
Yeah. It's not
goes through
true.
fender benders and whatever. But in the moment,
Yeah.
you're in it. It's a
Yeah.
head game.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
So it's taking for that person who goes through it, it's like taking that time to step back and just being rational. It's like, no, I'm not alone. This is millions of people, billions of people, and so many have gone through it. But we may not know as many people that go through it on the outside, like
Mm.
um, practicing how to deal with, like comforting somebody in that particular, um, you know, traumatic situation. We're not well versed in, but
Right.
it's like comforting anybody with anything. You just listen and be there.
Right. Don't correct theology in that moment. Don't preach. Just be there. It's okay if somebody is crying and they say something. You're like, I don't know how true that. Like, just shut up
Yeah, yeah.
and let the person feel. There might be a time and place in the future where you can gently like, hey,
Hmm.
I think but you got to earn that, and you got to be like, you care
Yeah.
about me, and you're with me, and you're
Hmm.
next to me, and you're like you said, a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah, and maybe there comes a time when the person who's going through it needs to move on.
Yeah, that's exactly. There is a time if it's several years in or whatever it might be. You're like, listen, you haven't made any movement on this. It's not
Hmm.
healthy at that point. Where
Hmm.
the place you were in, and it wasn't your fault you were in that place. But if you had stayed there 15 years later, we're still talking about I'm there. That's not good for you. Like that's not
No.
where God wants you to be. So someone needs to come alongside you and gently say, we gotta get you some
Yeah,
help.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for
But
sure.
like you said, it can really spiral. So I'm sure there's some moms out
Hmm.
there, and I do believe they're moms, whether they have other children or not, they're a mom that they spiral, and it can really spiral in their life. Did you
Hmm.
find that? I mean, you said spiritually, it felt like there was like a distance between you and God. You're just sort of going through the motions, church, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly never gave up.
No.
Um, it's just the lack of answers. That was the hardest part.
Mm,
Um, I just think trusting him fully.
mm,
That was the hardest thing to work on, and
mm.
I still feel like I'm working on that
Oh,
because
yeah. Till the day you die, Jen.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's just having the faith that he is in control and he knows what he's doing. But you don't understand that until, hindsight's 2020
Right.
always. And
Right.
you have to have God's perspective, not yours,
Mm.
because your perspective is usually wrong too.
Yeah, it's perspective. So it's
Mm,
sometimes it's fully wrong, but
mm.
sometimes it's just limited, right?
Yeah,
So your
exactly.
perspective a lot of time is correct in what you know, but that's
Mhm.
where it is important to realize God has something so much bigger. And I think
Mhm.
eventually you come around to that. But in the moment, I
It's
think it's
almost impossible.
yeah,
Mhm.
it is. The most profound book of suffering and faith in the Bible is Job. And if you look at his process, he never stopped believing. His faith was strong. The faith of Job was great. But boy, he had some choice things to say to God, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, he just stood there and said, "Let me suffer for your honor and glory." He didn't do that. He's like, Why? Why? If
Mhm.
you, like you said, it's like Job, like, just give me answers. If you
Mhm.
just give me some answers that would make sense to me, I'd feel better about this. And God's like, no, not going to do that.
Yep.
And, he had a lot better words because he's God, but that was sort of your experience. It's like, well, maybe if God could explain himself a little bit, like, all right, here's what's going to happen. Here's why this happened. Then
Mhm.
I could feel better about it, but you just felt silence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. A lot of people experience that.
Mhm.
So that happens. What was the next thing? Your next time you lost a baby, was it after having other children?
Yeah. So I got pregnant with Judah, I think a week after I was done the bad period.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure I've known you all these years. I'm sure I knew that at some point, but I can't remember at all. You have so many kids and in your story, but
Mhm.
um, so a week. So okay. So does that immediately help you, or are you now just terrified, or both?
Terrified.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Just at any moment, it could be gone
Were you
again.
trying to get pregnant, or
No.
you're just kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It just happened.
yeah,
And it usually doesn't happen that quickly because
yeah.
you only ovulate once a month and you don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Um, but yeah, it just happened.
Mm.
And so I had him, and then I was breastfeeding for like 11 months, and I got pregnant while I was breastfeeding. And it's not like ideal. They
Right.
say it's okay.
A lot of times they say you can't, but you can, as you proved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, back up a second. Let's
Hmm.
before we get to that. Your pregnancy with Judah had to have been like, especially early on. Did you announce it this time, or were you like, no, I'm not doing that?
Um, well, the symptoms were different. I was
Hmm.
very sick,
Yeah.
so it was hard to hide.
Okay. Yeah. So
So,
you did tell people.
yeah.
Yeah. At least you're. I mean, I think the general rule of thumb is that you tell people that you would want to know if you could lose the child,
Hmm.
but you don't want necessarily to throw it out there to the public and they're all asking you how you're doing, But
Hmm.
I don't think keeping it a complete secret is makes sense because you'd want your family
Hmm.
and close friends
Well,
to
at
know.
that point too, I also was wiser um on pregnancy and when usually babies will go to term,
Mm-hmm.
which is around 12 weeks. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of, when
Got to get
I don't know all the
not
full
always, but
sciences. Yeah,
yeah,
but
that's
yeah.
a big target for
Yeah,
sure.
first trimester getting through that's good.
Yeah.
Um,
So you get through
yeah.
that, you're feeling different symptoms. You're like, all right, I think this is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is there still like those moments at
Oh my
night?
gosh. Yeah, because you're like, oh, my symptoms aren't as bad today. Or once you start feeling the baby kick, you're like, oh, I didn't feel him kick, like that sort of thing. Um,
What was it like then, if you can remember,
mhm,
you're still dealing with this loss,
mhm,
but you're also excited, p- scared, but also really excited about the potential. Okay,
mhm.
I'll, actually experience having this baby. What was that like? That's a lot, I mean,
Yeah.
normally we would probably say, "Hey, Mom, take some time, get through that," but not your fault. It just happened. God had a different plan, obviously,
Mhm.
but that must have been pretty emotional for you.
Yeah, it was just every day
Yeah,
being concerned about,
yeah,
is this the day? Is this the day? Which is terrible and sad to have to think like that. But
Was there at any point, maybe after the first trimester, where that began to wane, or
yeah,
ultrasounds, things like that help you?
and I don't know why, but that pregnancy just felt different from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, like with the first one, I barely had any symptoms at all, which I'm talking about like feeling nauseous and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But with the second one, I don't know. I don't understand why people have feelings or whatever, but it just felt like different from the first one.
Okay.
Yes, I was still remembering everything that I had just gone through,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to go through that again. I was so nervous,
Yeah.
a lot. Um, I think what helped me was, um, in a scientific sense, they took those hormone levels again, and they are supposed to double every 48 hours.
Mhm.
And so they took them and they did. They were going up like they were supposed to. And I was like, okay, that's different than the last time and that's a good sign. Um, but it's not like I wouldn't call the doctor's office all the time and be like, is this normal? Is this normal? Is this normal? Because I also didn't have anyone else going through a pregnancy at that time. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, we
You're
were
still
still
young.
so young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so going through the pregnancy too was also a bit lonely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But yeah, when you start showing and you feel the baby kicking and all that, you're like, okay. And then there's another point, 24 weeks, where they consider a baby viable to live outside of the womb if they were born early.
Mhm.
And you feel better. Um, and then eventually, it happens.
Mhm.
And you're also afraid, like, if they're born prematurely, they'll have to be in the NICU and all that. It's just like all of these things
I know.
you have to think about, and anything can go wrong at any time. But I also reminded myself that, like, all babies are miracles,
Mhm.
and
It's true.
every day that this continues is a miracle.
Mm.
Um, and I was and am always thankful for that gift because they're all his, not mine.
Yeah, but because of your experience, you truly don't take it for granted. All of us
Yeah.
can say that, but you know, you, I have two kids. We had two pregnancies, so I completely agree in my mind that it's a miracle. But to really have gone through what you've gone through, like you get it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always go right. It doesn't always go, or at least it goes right. I know, correct my theology to God's eyes, but not to our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you experienced firsthand. Again, you didn't want to. It's not like you signed up for it, but there you go. That's how life goes in a
Mm-hmm.
broken world. So
Yes.
you have good old Judah, and you're 11 months having him and
Postpartum breastfeeding.
breastfeeding and all of
Yeah.
that. Where were you again? It's at this point 13 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Um, so you may not remember completely, but how are you feeling at that point when you got Jude? Obviously, it's a baby. That's not an easy time sleeping and all of that. But are you feeling? Are you still thinking about that loss, or is it too much to?
Once you actually have a baby, they take up like your whole brain.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just don't have time to think about
yeah.
the loss and the sadness and all that. Still, it's definitely not as fresh.
And then you find out you're pregnant. How did that?
Yes.
How did that?
Um, I remember telling Tim and I was excited, I was happy. And you don't think it's gonna happen again. You don't think you're gonna lose again
Yeah,
because oh, people usually have one loss or maybe two or whatever. But yeah, so I was a little nervous about having been pregnant while breastfeeding. I'm not a doctor. I don't know like all the
yeah.
hormone things and like why that's not great or
Mm-hmm.
and then there's other people who do get pregnant while breastfeeding and everything's fine. I
I
honestly,
grew up Irish. Most Irish families was like they had a kid every year. It's like I don't know.
I honestly don't think it matters.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
there's some things that
So, of
yeah.
course, I was concerned. But this time, I went on to 8 weeks
Hmm.
pregnant before I had the loss. Um, I do remember going into the doctors, and I'm, this is so long ago still.
Oh. Going to the doctors because you weren't feeling well, or
Um, no, I think it was for an ultrasound.
so this time
And
you got to the point
yeah,
where you're
yes, I
seeing a
did.
doctor.
8 weeks is when you
Okay.
haven't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when you might have your first ultrasound. And there was no heartbeat.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I had just that was another natural loss. Like it just left my body.
Were you by yourself, or was Tim with you? Do you remember?
Oh
You know,
gosh. I know. It's so long ago.
it's okay. Yeah, I know you've.
Um what I remember about it is the process of losing because it was worse than the first time.
Why?
There's more blood.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah.
physical process.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um yeah.
yeah. Well, 2 weeks is big, and that's a big.
Yes. Yeah, it's
A
a
lot
big
happens
development.
every. Yeah, it
Yeah, the
is.
first 12 weeks,
Mm,
there's huge development.
yeah,
Um,
but now
yeah.
you have a at this point a
Right.
year old baby, and you.
Yes, I remember going to the ER
Yeah,
and all I could think about was I was just so thankful I at least had a baby this time.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, like
Mm,
that is what I was thinking. Um, I'm like I've been through this before. I know what's happening. In a way I could comfort myself, but I was still so horrible emotionally because it's like, well, two losses and only one. My odds were bad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it can happen once, but now twice. You're like, this is some kind of a weird pattern, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about the feelings of, is it my fault? Have you gotten past some of those? Like you had a baby, so it's not like.
Well, I knew it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing I thought before I even had Judah was I'm like, there's billions of people in the world. They got to come from somewhere. Like, maybe it'll be me. Maybe eventually it'll happen. And it
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. You contributed to the billions, that's for
Yeah.
sure, Jen. Eventually,
Yeah.
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 Man, so again, had people known about this, or was this?
I think we were more wary
Yeah.
and we didn't announce it. We just told people after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was your experience between the first and second, as far as other people, similar or a little different this time?
It
Or
was more of a closer circle of people.
yeah.
Like we would tell family, close
Hmm.
friends.
Yeah.
We didn't announce it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that a good thing, do you think? Because people
Yeah, it
didn't
was
know.
embarrassing the first time, even though I didn't do anything wrong. It's still
Mm.
embarrassing because
Like, hey, remember I
yeah, yeah,
said?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it shouldn't be, but I hear you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, um, was there anything that you did? You obviously didn't have a funeral or anything like that, right? Or did you do any kind of with either of the first two, or you were
No.
like, anything for yourself with God? You just, or it was just kind of like, well, did it feel like open ended? Just
I at that point kind of was like I'll have as many kids as you'll let me have.
you're almost like, gee, you're getting callous already on this.
Yeah, I know, I know.
In a self-protective way, like not in
Yeah.
a bad way, callous, but in a,
But also,
it is what it
if you'll
is.
allow it, I'll do it.
Yeah. That's not something you want to get experienced at, but you did, you know.
Hmm.
Well, when you think about it, like you said, like it's far more common than we think. And going back in the past before healthcare is what it is, um, I mean, it was not uncommon for a mom to lose several, kind of like your story, maybe even lose some kids after birth, because they just didn't have the healthcare that God has given our doctors far more knowledge to be able to help or to see. Um, I'd also argue to end pregnancies, which we shouldn't do, but they do that too, which they never did. So, yeah, but I mean, a mother would go through. I mean, I've heard stories of my aunts and great aunts and three miscarriages and lost a couple. My dad's mom was born, had six sisters, four brothers who all died. Not even as miscarriages. I don't even know if there was. I think there probably was, but it's like so. It was a more of a common thing, and I think people were a little bit more hardened to it, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of what you became. Like, all right, God,
Mm.
this is my journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm I'm here for what you have for me. But let's keep it at two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens next in your motherhood story? Do you have carried a term, or does the next one happen?
Well, before I go there, I
Yeah.
do remember a nurse. I don't remember
Hmm.
which time it was that I went into the hospital, but she, I will never forget her because she said, I've been pregnant 9 times.
Oh,
And I was like, what?
how
I don't
many?
think she means she has 9 kids. But
Yeah, it's
yes,
not usually how you put it, right?
before I went on to have the other two losses, um, I think she was at like 4 or 5 losses.
Mm.
And I just felt not alone for the
Yeah,
first time in a while.
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like,
Did she
wow.
say anything else, or did she just like say, "I've been there"?
Um,
I mean, she's a
she didn't
nurse.
have to.
Yeah, it was
But
just a bonding immediately.
right.
Yeah,
And a
yeah.
beautiful thing was after I ended up having all my kids, I saw her and I got to tell her.
Really,
Yeah. I saw her at a soccer game or something and
you remembered it?
um remember.
Her? Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because I bumped into a lot of nurses
yeah.
afterwards. I don't know why. But yeah, I just remember seeing her and then I told her that I
Mm.
had the twins. But
Mm.
but yes, so it was loss, Judah, loss, and then I had Atticus. Um
Okay, so
and
Atticus came next. So
but
yeah,
it wasn't I didn't get pregnant right away.
yeah.
It was I think it was like I went on a trip to Canada and I don't know if I just felt like better or more relaxed or whatever, but right after that trip I got pregnant.
Hmm.
Like two
Were you
weeks.
trying to get pregnant?
Mm-mm.
No,
No, never.
you didn't need to try.
No.
Yeah, yeah. You were good at that.
Yeah, God gave me the body to believe
Yeah, I
in, I
guess
guess.
so.
Yeah.
I guess so. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So now how you feeling? Okay, so there's a little bit of time's gone by. You feel confident, or are you still like, ugh, here we go.
No, it got worse.
What got worse?
um, the type of miscarriage because I
Mm,
would go further each time.
mm,
The next time I lost, it was at 10 weeks.
okay.
And
It's like 2 weeks every time here.
yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the wait state actually.
yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and you're like, oh, I'm so close, 10 weeks.
So if you were 10 weeks, do you remember if you had an ultrasound where the baby was
Yes,
alive?
I remember because it wasn't as long ago now. There was nothing in the sac. I went for an ultrasound, saw no baby, just the sac. So,
Well, what does that mean?
like
That's
the
not a good.
embryonic
Okay.
fluid sac.
So the baby
No
wasn't
baby in
growing?
there.
Is that what they
It
were?
was just empty.
So you'd already lost it?
No, it's just that part of it wasn't developing. I don't
Okay.
know, but it was just an empty sac.
So
So
what did the doctors say to you when that happened?
because of that, and it wasn't just coming out naturally, I had to schedule a DNC, which I'm not sure if you know what that is, but
No.
it is unfortunately the same procedure that you have when you have an abortion
Okay.
because you can't expel it yourself. And if you don't get it out, it's not good for your body. So it's not just going to get absorbed and stuff. So it
Yeah.
has to be taken out manually.
Well, what was that like? That must have been horrible
That was
for
a
you.
process because you can't, it doesn't like when you're going through a miscarriage, it's just leaving. But this was, I have to wait for an appointment to then have it taken out of me. And you have to go under anesthesia and it's just not fun.
Mm,
And it's a surgery and you don't feel good after.
mm,
And yeah.
yeah. Um, had you announced it at that point, or now you have two kids? You've lost
Um,
two, right?
yeah.
So
So
are
that
you
was,
getting more and more wary? Because 10 weeks, so were you getting close enough where you told a bunch of people, or?
I think we kept it the same
Yeah.
where we never announced it again
Hmm.
until, you just can't hide it anymore.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, yeah.
What was your prayer life like during that time? I know it's hard to remember because you've been through so
Hmm.
many, but anything you can remember of, did you feel that distance again, or were you?
It was just a constant worry. It's
Yeah.
just a constant, well, it's happened this many times. Is this how it's going to keep going?
Mm.
I'm like, how many times now? How many times am I going to have to go through this? And why am I going through this? Um,
How about people around you? Were they any better? Was it similar?
um, I think
Were they
I
like, oh,
didn't need it as much.
Jen's been through this. She's good, which they shouldn't, but you know,
It was almost like Tim and I were getting used to it.
I know.
And we didn't cry as much because it
Mm.
just, it was almost normal. And it's not, it shouldn't be normal. But yeah, it
Yeah.
just wasn't as emotionally hard.
Mm.
Yeah, I still cried and yeah, I was still upset. And I hated the fact that I was having more losses than babies. Like that really bothered me.
You're like keeping score. Down 3-2 now. Oh,
Yeah,
how
I
funny.
evened it at the end,
How
but
funny is it that, not funny, but how cool is it
yeah.
that God said, all right, I'll make sure you win, Jen?
Yeah,
Because you won 5-4.
yeah,
Jeez.
I know.
Was there ever any point that you felt bad you weren't as emotional? Like that this bait, or was it just like made sense to you?
It made sense, and I always wish I could be that person who could steal the resolve a little bit more, but I didn't, I just wasn't as emotional.
Yeah.
We were also in the process of trying to buy our first home.
Hmm.
So when you're busy with two kids and you're busy with that,
Yeah.
you don't have as much time to think about the loss when you're busy with your life.
Yeah, that's a really good point that like you your first one, you had no kids, you're young, you're just kind of, you had not a lot to do but sit there and think about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I almost wonder if there's and not necessarily with you, but one of the concerns could be that you're like, yeah, I'm used to this. I got things to worry about, but are you not dealing with some things that maybe you need to deal with? Because you can just like anything, we can distract ourselves, but then it's still there. It's like a wound that we pretend isn't hurting us because we got too much to do, but it's still there. And I don't know if you've thought about that part at all. That was there anything that you should have dealt with that you didn't?
I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Um,
You may never know.
yeah, I think talking it out is just the best thing you can do with anything. And if you're not talking, you're keeping it in.
Yeah.
And that's just not good, no matter what problem you're having.
Mm.
So I think I wish I had more friends to talk to, maybe, because the people around me at that point were having kids and weren't having miscarriages still.
Yeah. Nobody else had a miscarriage.
No, not until I was done having kids did
Yeah.
anybody have a loss.
Yeah. So the feelings of what is wrong with me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, uh, you and I were talking earlier, and I've had this conversation with others who've been on the podcast about who've lost babies, but not like in your case, but like knew they were going to lose them. And I do think, at least in society, there's this idea that because we've been told, which you and I completely disagree with, but we're this is just so slammed down our throat that it's not a baby until it's a baby, until it can be out of your womb and all of that. And we're really told that and told that and told that. So when you lose a baby before it's a baby, and granted, you're in a church, you're in a lot of Christians who don't believe that, but I almost wonder if that creates this sort of taboo idea that if I recognize your loss, I'm actually recognizing that's a baby.
Mhm.
And so if I don't, if it's just like, wow, it's just a sack of whatever, um, then it's tough, it's difficult, it's a biological issue that you had to go through. But other than that, and I guess people could at least acknowledge that it's a future potential, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
you do lose that, right? Like, yeah, there was a good potential. You were pregnant, but you didn't really lose a baby. You and I know. I mean, you know far better than even I that that's those are real kids.
Mhm.
And I almost wonder if that's the problem. And I think like talking about it's so important. Don't and I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to anyone who is going through this or does go through it or has someone who goes through it. Please don't measure this loss as better or worse than some other loss. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like it's not
Absolutely.
as big of a loss, and I that infuriates me. It
Mhm.
is, and so therefore you have a right to mourn that, like anybody has a right to mourn it.
Mhm.
That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. The only difference I think is once the baby's out, you start creating memories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets worse. I mean, I think it's worse now that I have an 18 and 21-year-old versus when they were one, and I love them deeply. And I'm not leveling my pain would be worse than someone who loses a 1 year old,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's a kid who I
Memories for other people too.
yeah, so many people. So I
Yeah.
agree with that, but to say, you never really met your child or any of those things. Then I'm
Mhm.
not saying people say those things. If
Yeah.
they do, I mean, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But that's some of it. Like, and my biggest issue is I don't want people who experience it to feel like they should keep it inside, like you were saying, because it's not as big of a loss as so and so. It's not. It is, and you should talk about it.
Mhm.
You should get help, whether it's talk to someone who's been through it, a spiritual, a pastor, a counselor. Deal with it. Don't keep it in. Um, and even if having, and again, especially the longer you carry it, having it becomes even more and more like this reality. But even having some type of not funeral but memorial is fine. You don't have to. There's nothing, no rules on it, no biblical rules. But I think don't feel like you can't. Is my point,
Mhm. Yeah.
because sometimes that doesn't give you closure, but it gives you like it helps with the process rather than it's just gone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you can't exactly bury
yeah.
because
You can't.
yeah.
You can't. But you can still, I mean, especially in today's, most of the funerals I do are cremations and people, they
Yeah.
have an urn or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
but it's really about the people left behind more than the person. And it becomes a good part of the process of just telling stories or praying or remembering who God is. And it can really be helpful. It's really hard, but it can be really, really helpful. Um, but again, with something like that, it comes down to what you need, and that's the
Yeah.
key. There's no rules to this. Like, well, I don't deserve to have, uh, a memorial service because I didn't any of those kinds of things. Uh, you know, get rid of them. You
Well,
know.
you don't want to. I mean, for me, I would definitely not even be able to afford having any type of memorial service, like formally. Um, Personally, maybe that's something I could have or should have considered. Um, but it just wasn't something I needed at the
Yeah.
time. It
And
was
I
it was
yeah
more the emotional side
yeah
because the other part, there was nothing you can do.
yeah. Yeah, no, again, I would never tell someone they should feel pressure that they should do that, But I
Hmm.
think there's things you can do that aren't even costly,
Right,
you don't need a
right.
burial at that point. You don't need any to pay for anything like that. You just if you have a pastor, or even if you just have some close people that you get together and
Mm-hmm.
pray and
Mm-hmm.
just have a moment, then you do it. But I think my larger point that I think we agree on is just don't lessen your pain
Yes.
because society seems to want you to. Don't do it.
I never actually once thought that.
Yeah.
You just, I can't think about other people's perspectives and opinions when I'm just so engrossed in mine.
Yeah.
It's like it's impossible to get somebody else's point of view when really you want someone else to have your point of view.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. which is
Yeah, I
weird.
don't think because of your strong faith, even when you were young, I think that's part of why you never even considered that because that's a baby and period,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And most of your friends would have agreed, and
yeah,
so that's in
yeah.
family. Um, but I think there's people that might not be in the same situation where they're around people who maybe don't think that, and I
Mm,
just don't want them to feel like they need to please other people when it comes to their grief. Do you ever think
no.
about meeting your children someday that you
Oh
haven't
yeah,
met?
yeah,
That will be like
yeah. I don't know what it's gonna be like.
it's so hard, right?
Yeah, I'm just like, how many exactly?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's true because you said there's at least one that you're not sure about.
yeah, um,
Yeah,
and boy or girl,
I know.
yeah.
And God's word doesn't really give us a lot of detail or like,
Mm-mm.
my thinking is just speculation, regardless that we're going to meet people kind of in their prime, even if they never got
Mm.
there. Like, we're not going to,
Mhm.
like, I certainly hope not, because if I live to be 98, I certainly hope that's not going to be how I'm going to be, right? We get new bodies eventually anyway.
Right.
But, like, I don't want to be a 90-year-old stumbling around, but that's how people are going to remember me, the last memories, if
Mhm.
I make it that, which I probably won't, but if I do. But, so you're probably going to see the person in their prime. So it would make the sense
That'd
that,
be awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
they're going to have to come up to you and be like, "Hey, hey,
yes.
mom."
I mean, I only think of it positively.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we sometimes don't think of it enough because it's hard to imagine. But
Yeah. Yeah. Or, yeah.
but all of those kids, they're God's children. They didn't,
Yeah.
they had no opportunity to obviously to turn their backs on the
Mhm.
gospel.
Mhm.
They're who knows? Maybe one of them God's like, nope, you're mine. We don't know.
Mhm.
Those are theological questions that we will never really have the answer to. But I have no doubt those children and so many others will be in the kingdom.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's really cool. All right, so you're down 3-2, like this is a baseball game
Yeah.
or something. And what happens next?
Um, I actually got very, very sick. It was
Mm,
2013 was a horrible year for me.
yeah.
Um, I had mono. I'm like, how the heck did I get mono?
Mm,
But I was in the hospital for 2 weeks,
yeah.
and that was the first time I ever left the boys
Hmm.
um, without seeing them for 24 hours. It was the first time I ever didn't see them. That I was away from them.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that really stunk. Like I had to miss a concert, and it was just really it just sucked. So after that, I'm like, um, recovering from that, and I did end up getting pregnant again, and
Still
then
recovering from mono, and you got pregnant.
yeah, yeah, like maybe like a couple months later,
Oh,
and
I
I
was gonna say, Tim, leave you alone. Leave your wife alone. She's got mono. All right, a couple months. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, not immediately. No, I definitely had to still recover at home
Yeah,
from that. It was
yeah,
really bad.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I got pregnant again, and it was at 12 weeks that I lost this one.
So you go down four
So
to
you
two.
think you're
Yeah.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're not.
Where What was that like? Did you feel like it was a normal pregnancy, or would you suspect something was wrong now that you were pretty experienced with both?
Um, because it was after Atticus, this is still like
Mm-hmm.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to remember. Um, all I can remember about that one is that I had to have another DNC.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't come out.
Did you have a normal ultrasound this time, or was there again a not a baby there? And do you remember?
um,
It's pretty sad. You've had so many of these situations that you're
mhm,
trying to
mhm.
like really
Sort through them.
yeah.
I can't remember exactly. I just remember like key moments. Um, I don't remember exactly if there wasn't a heartbeat or what, but obviously something told me that it wasn't going to
Mm-hmm.
happen and it wasn't going to come out.
Yeah.
So I had to have the,
Procedure again.
yeah.
Was it similar to the other one? You're just getting callous now, or was it harder?
Um, I still didn't know how many more
Mm.
it was going to be. Um,
Yeah. Because you weren't going to give up.
hmm
But
yeah.
man, that's a lot. Was there ever at any point, it sounds like you were just sort of getting used to it. Was there ever any point where you just like, God, I just can't do this again. I just can't.
No, but I remember asking him not to let me get pregnant while breastfeeding again because
Okay.
actually that one, the the third one after Atticus, I was pregnant while breastfeeding. And
Okay.
I was like,
It's the
that
second
can't
time.
happen again
Yep. But then this
because I
one,
can have control over that.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
Right.
But yeah, I was just asking that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do remember my loss is taking a toll on people around me. Like, it's just sad, like my dad was like, "Can you stop?"
Can you please stop? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like Bill. Can we
Yeah.
just stop doing this, please?
Yeah. So,
Well, at least your dad and just see your daughter go through all that. I mean, you're experiencing it, but then, oh,
yeah.
like I'm just
Yeah.
tired of having to say I'm so sorry. Just
hmm
like everybody's
hmm
just weary of the grief. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, I think that was closer to Christmas time.
Mm,
Um, and that's the worst time, I
yeah.
feel like.
I would agree.
Um, but that year, I remember going to this school event for Tim, right? Actually, it was right in the beginning of the following year, 2014.
Mhm.
And I was like, I feel funny. I feel like different. Like something's going on, like pregnancy wise. And I had found out in the beginning, very beginning of the year, that I was pregnant again. So it was not very long after.
Yeah.
um,
At
and
this point,
that's,
you're just used to getting pregnant. You're like, well,
yeah.
at this point.
So yeah, that was Eden.
Yeah.
Um, and I was also maybe too, I was getting callous because I I just got rid of all the clothes, the baby clothes. I was just like really upset, really fed up. So I got rid of all the baby clothes.
Well, it's
Um,
a girl now anyway.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that
Um,
one went great. There was never any scares that you can remember with Eden.
no,
Good.
no. Tim didn't even go with me to the gender screening.
Yeah.
My friend went with me. I didn't go alone, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. And then I found out it was a girl. I was like, okay, good, because I didn't have any clothes.
Right. Just throw away all the boys'
Yeah.
clothes. Yeah.
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 So.
Wow.
hmm
And so then what happens? You have Eden. Judah's how old now? How old are the kids? Difference?
Um, Judah was 4
Mm-hmm.
and Atticus was like 2.5. So the
Okay.
boys were like 22 months apart, like not a
Yeah.
full 2 years. And then Eden came at 2.5 years later. So
Mm.
like a little bit more than 2 years.
So now you're
Yeah.
feeling joy. Your dad's like, all right, I'm glad you didn't give up. We gotta.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she brings a lot of joy because you mean you had two in a row before her.
Yeah.
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 And that hadn't happened.
Oh, that was 2 in a row. It was
Yeah.
really
Now you're
bad.
like, maybe I just shouldn't do this anymore because maybe
hmm
I can't do it.
Yeah.
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 But God said nope.
hmm Yeah. And I was, so I was breastfeeding her. And I just definitely remember asking God, please
Yeah.
don't
I don't want to do
let
this.
me get pregnant
Hmm.
again unless um, it's after I'm done breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So a week after I'm done breastfeeding, even I got pregnant with the twins.
Wow.
But their pregnancy was different.
Well,
Um,
twins.
Not just that, because of the miscarriages, no matter what every single time I got pregnant, they would test the levels, the
Yep.
HCG levels. And with the twins, I was expecting to, well, I didn't know they were twins yet. I just
Hmm.
was like, I'm pregnant again. Um, and I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a loss. Like, that was the pattern, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Well, self-protection in a
Yeah.
way at a certain
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had the levels done, and the doctor called me back and was like, they're going down. You're going to have another loss. And I was, you know, upset, devastated, and um and backing up just a little bit, I don't know why, but Judah was praying for twins as a 5-year-old. The next time he's like, "Oh, God, please give me twin
Has he
sisters."
regretted that since?
Many times.
No, he won't.
Yes.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, I don't know. Like, Tim would go up, put the boys to bed, and he would pray that. And Tim's like, well, he's praying for this. I'm like, okay. Why? I mean,
Yeah.
why two at a time? I don't know. But so yeah, the doctor tells me over the phone it's a loss. Just expect.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, very frank. Um, I
Yeah.
was taken aback a little bit.
Was it a different doctor or someone you'd had before and was just like, oh, she's used to this?
Um, no, I had never had her
Okay.
before.
She was just maybe
Yeah,
like that somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so Judah was with me at the time that I got the call because Eden's just a baby and
Yeah.
Atticus is just running around because
Yeah.
he's 2 or whatever. And Judah was like, "Who's that?" And I'm crying,
Yeah.
And so I told him, like, why am I telling him?
Judah's always been an old soul.
For sure. So I told him, and I told him what the doctor said, and he starts crying, and he's like, "They're wrong, they're wrong." And I'm like, "What?" Yeah, just crazy. And I'm like, "No, the doctor's usually right." So because of um, having the levels done, they wanted me to go have an ultrasound. For
Hmm.
some reason, I can't remember why, they thought maybe it was ectopic
Yep.
because I wasn't, having the the loss. And so they wanted me to go in for an ultrasound. And between that time, I'm like, I feel so sick, like
Right.
what is going on? I thought it was supposed to be a loss.
Right.
And then so I go in for the ultrasound telling them that they think it's ectopic, so they have to do it. They're required to. And I look up at the screen and I'm in there alone. Tim's in the waiting room. I don't know why. And I see 2 sacks with 2 babies. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to lose 2.
Oh, jeez.
I was, I was like, all right, whatever. So then I see 2 heartbeats. And I'm like, and they're alive right now. I'm like, that really stinks. And so I go out in the waiting room and I tell Tim, and then we go see the doctor. They bring us back to a room, and she comes in smiling. I'm like, why are you smiling? I'm having a loss. Like, so she's like, do you know what's happening? And I'm like, no, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And she's like, no, you're having twins. The lady who told me I was having a miscarriage read my chart wrong.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, she was off by a digit. So the numbers were not going down, they were going up by a lot. So I don't know why she read it wrong, but
Because that's what happens when you have twins that go up, I would
yeah,
guess.
like
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
So maybe because there was like a lot of twos in the number, I think she just read it wrong.
Yeah, that probably something you need to be careful with though before you go calling.
Yes, because I could have like been drinking or something to comfort myself or something like that.
Yeah,
I
who
think,
knows what people might
well,
do. Yeah. Instead, you
because
had a 5-year-old that said, "Nah, it's wrong."
I think the worst I did was have a decaf coffee because I was so against having coffee when I was pregnant. I was like, I'll just.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I did to comfort myself. And it just, it was over a long weekend. I had to wait for this ultrasound. And then thankfully,
Mm.
I was like, all right, well, that makes a lot more sense as to why I'm feeling so sick.
Yeah, still pregnant.
Yeah.
Did you tell Judah? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you were right.
Yeah.
And you were prayed for this. So you better help.
Yeah.
Is he now being a what is he for? How old is Judah now? 14.
14.
Yeah. So does he remember any of that?
I don't know how much he remembers. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll never forget it because they ended up being born on his birthday.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you asked for it.
I was like, if you want an answer to prayer, that is the most clearest answer to prayer I've ever seen in my life.
So much answer to prayer. Wow. Wow. So now you got 5 kids.
hmm
Wow.
During the twins' pregnancy, though, it was scary because I bled a
Mm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a huge trial.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I went in for ultrasounds, they could give me answers. They would say your placenta is blocking some area, and because it's moving, it's causing bleeding or
Yeah.
whatever. I was so nervous because when you feel a baby kick, yeah, I'm like, which one is it? Are they both
I
moving? I'm
know.
like,
I know. Oof.
yeah.
Yeah. Tough to sleep and
Oh my gosh, it was really bad. I couldn't get out of bed, all of that.
yeah.
But and then twins usually come early,
Mm-hmm.
and mine didn't. They were delivered at 38 weeks, which is to term and
Mm-hmm.
honestly pretty late for twins.
Mm-hmm.
And especially since the doctor told me that when I had them, my uterus was paper thin.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just ready to explode, like
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Are you planning on having any more?" And I said, "No."
Yeah.
That I just health wise, I knew I shouldn't.
Yeah.
So that's why we stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I think we would have had more? I don't think so.
Yeah. You
Anyway.
might have had more loss.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I was thankful that
Mm.
I could have two in a row and experience that, two pregnancies to term in a row.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm never going to
3
experience
kids.
that. Yeah, yeah.
It's a great story of just perseverance where you for someone that dealt with as much loss as you also have so much life as well.
hmm
Having 5 children. So now the twins are how old? How long we been?
Almost 8.5.
Yeah. So you've had a number of years and busy household and kids are everywhere, but you're also out of the toddler stage and
hmm
finally no more
hmm
diapers. It's been a while even from that, I'm sure. So what how have you processed it anymore with some time looking back and seeing it all? What kinds of things has God taught you?
Um, I think Tim is overwhelmed with the amount of children we have.
Yeah.
um, and at the same time, I there's all these I don't know the right word, but it's like pregnancy control. It's like what is right, what isn't, and
Hmm.
so
Yeah, right, right, exactly. Yeah.
we didn't do that. Um, so this is what we ended up with.
Right.
And I'm like, maybe we wish we had a little more freedom these days, but at the same time, I'm like, no, because they're gonna, God has a plan for everything, and He has a plan for them. And they are all saved and baptized.
Mm,
And I'm like, well, we just filled up His kingdom a little more. So that in and of itself is worth it.
mm,
So, I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know who they're gonna bring to Christ. I don't know, what they're gonna accomplish or whose lives they're gonna touch. But
Mm.
yeah. I don't regret having 5 kids. I just think maybe we would have gotten different jobs.
Yeah, right, to pay for them. Yeah, that's a whole podcast in of itself. Probably not mine, but of society itself makes it so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it shouldn't be. We should celebrate lots
Mm-hmm.
of kids, but it's really hard because they're so expensive. If you really want the best for them and give them not just care and food and shelter,
Mm-hmm.
but experiences, and we want to
Yes.
go on vacation or things
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, 5 kids, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot. So, but man, I see your family, and when I see, I don't always see together, but sometimes, and it's a lot, but they're awesome, and it's such a what a story to see what God
Mm-hmm.
did in the midst of all of that. You didn't give up. There's things that you see now, but things that you will see someday. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if I had stopped and didn't have those twins, and they wouldn't have had
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to, like you said, bring people to Christ, or do whatever they're going to do that God has for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then grandbabies or whatever might come
Mm-hmm.
for, probably be a lot. Old fashioned family for you, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had the opportunity? You mentioned one person, I think, earlier that you've had the opportunity to speak into that has gone through a miscarriage.
Surprisingly, no,
Mm.
because I'm surrounded by a bunch of introverts because I'm an introvert. So I befriend introverts.
Yeah, yeah,
So they don't want to talk about it. But I feel like even
yeah,
doing this
yeah.
is um is good enough. I mean, if I happen to, meet somebody down the line, then sure I am well equipped to handle it. Um, but I also feel like, everything I've ever been through, it's stored up for use at
God will
some
use it.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're certainly not old, so you're not having babies anymore, but you have a lot of years left. You
Hmm.
know, at least we expect, and there will be opportunities. you know and like you said, just to be there, and they may not want to say anything if they're an introvert or whatever, but they know this is somebody who's really
Hmm.
been through this, expert in this experience, unfortunately. but
Hmm.
but when it comes to that, or even this, fortunately,
Yeah.
because you.
I have actually thought about taking it online. I just didn't know how yet.
Mm,
Um, just to share and be like, I'm here. You're not alone. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, not like I was jumping at it, but I was like, I
yeah,
know I should do this.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. No, I that's the whole idea of this, is people to whether they never meet you and they just learn from your story, or they know you, or do get a chance to meet you, to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. This person has been through all of this.
Hmm.
Um, any perspective that you have now on what God did for you? I mean, a lot of it will be in heaven. You're like, oh, but
Um, Prior to having kids, I do remember telling Tim, I was like, if we don't end up having kids, let's live it up. I was like, if this is what's gonna happen, let's just have a really great life.
yeah,
Like do everything we ever wanted to do.
yeah.
But that's not what happened, and I'm glad because I don't regret. I mean, so many people yearn for motherhood, and there's huge infertility problems these days, and
Mm,
I don't take any of it for granted. But
mm.
yeah, what going your original point to that question? I don't remember.
Just what? No, that's a great
Yeah,
answer. It's just
yeah.
like what God, you
Oh
know.
yes. I think through the losses, he was protecting us.
Mm,
Perhaps, like I said, I'll never know. One of the losses I did get results back that it was a chromosomal abnormality. Um, I don't know how that would have ended up. But I think when you don't have to deal with that, you're granted freedom in a way.
Mm,
Um, and say I never had kids and I only had losses, I would have been given, and I don't hope anybody takes this wrong, but like the gift of freedom
yeah.
to do maybe more things for him or
Mm,
just different things.
yeah.
And maybe he would have just said, it's just not for you. And I
Right.
wish I knew that then, of course.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for me, I was just like, however many you'll give me is what I'll have.
That just became your prayer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do you feel like your faith? I mean, I think it's pretty normal as you grow and get older, regardless of what you go through, your faith increases if you're truly a believer. But is there specific ways that God changed how you trust him or
I
your
just always
spiritual?
held on to the verse that with man it is impossible, with God all things are possible.
Mm,
So I'm like, it's possible for me to have more babies.
yeah.
It's possible for me to get pregnant again.
Yeah.
So that's what I held on to. Um, that's that's been honestly the driving verse for
Mm.
me.
Well, one of the things I've learned is if I need someone to pray for me, I'm going to call Judah. I'm going to be real careful on what I ask him to pray for. And then
Yeah.
I'll expect it to happen on his birthday, on all three of their birthdays.
Yeah. That was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you telling your stories, plural, I guess, but really it's a
Mm-hmm.
story that's still
Hmm.
unfolding.
Yes.
Um, for a lot of the reasons we've already um, laid out. There's people that are going to see this that have gone through it or know someone, and I think it's really important to. It's real loss. It hurts.
Hmm.
Be there for people. You don't need to have the answers. You don't need to fix it, especially if you're a guy,
Hmm.
because we like to fix
Oh
things.
my gosh. That is what I've learned. Mm.
Yes, and
Yeah.
you are married to someone who is a go-getter, and I'm going to accomplish this, and it's a
Hmm.
huge strength of his, but it's so hard when you can't accomplish it.
There's
It's,
nothing you can do.
right, so
Hmm.
hard,
Hmm.
so hard, and every guy's like that to a degree, and women are too. Some women are just fix it. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to fix it. It's like, well,
Hmm.
can't fix these things.
Hmm.
Only God can. So you just be there, and it's enough.
Hmm.
You may not see it in the moment, but it's enough that people feel alone. And when you're next to them, they don't feel as alone.
Hmm.
I liked how you put it earlier, as alone.
Hmm. Yeah.
you know. Well, thanks again. And we're looking forward to just seeing what God does with your family and,
Mm.
you know, and appreciate it. I'm sure that you're here if anybody is going through that.
Hmm.
You're an introvert, but you're willing to help, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And cut.